My name is Nate Green. I am a technology and instructional coach at a private school in Washington, D.C. And I'm here today to present what I call social media is stunting social justice in schools. I want to talk briefly about where I see a major problem in education that I hope this session is one step moving us forwards, giving us a better chance to solve this. Which is two things that are really hot and trendy right now. One is diversity, equity, and inclusion, which I think is very important. And the other is social emotional learning. Again, something that's very important. We need to be supporting all of our students, giving them their best chance to learn and succeed. And those two things matter deeply to education, which explains why they're trendy right now, and I think they should be. However, this session starts to get into what I think is a missing piece of that movement that schools, educators really need to roll up their sleeves and dig into a little bit in order to make a difference in those two areas, which is what our students are doing and what's happening on social media. And I think that until we get into social media spaces, we can only do so much and make so much progress in areas like equity, inclusion, and social emotional learning. So this session we'll get into a little bit today where social media fits into that, which is why I call it social media is stunting social justice in our schools. And when we get together at the conference, we will do one activity. We'll do some scenarios where we'll talk through some of the stuff that I talk about in this video and how we would apply them to some scenarios or to some problems that I've witnessed. And then, of course, I'll give you some time to talk about my own system and what I've done and how it applies to you. And end with a Q&A. And before I jump in, I want to sort of start where I came from with this, why I ended up with this session. I'm going to talk about one story, a little bit about what happened in my school, and then we will do some more of these scenarios and stories later in the session. So it started for me many years ago, 4 or 5 years ago now, where we in our private high school, we have a little lounge for seniors. And we had a group of seniors that ripped a pride flag down from the senior lounge where they all sit, hang out, etc. And we were trying to figure out why and who did that and what was the root cause of this, and we wanted to have some dialogue about this. So a number of concerned students approached me and two of my colleagues asking if we could address this and have a conversation about this. So we set up a forum after school to have this conversation. And long story short, what we found is that a group of senior boys that attended the session didn't speak much. And yet, after it was over, they had a little meeting essentially in the parking lot amongst each other. And I overheard them basically disagreeing with everything that was said in the meeting. So there was this faux consensus and this faux progress that we thought we had made from this conversation, only to realize that actually right afterwards there was a separate meeting, breaking everything that we had built. So this sort of story launched us on a journey that helped us, a couple of colleagues and I, build a program that we're really proud of, that we call Student-to-Student Forums, that we think addresses some of the problems that social media is creating for us. And I'm talking about this what I would call meeting after the meeting, because what we realized is that this was happening ubiquitously on social media, on anything controversial at all at our school, in national news and politics in the world. And so what we're seeing and what we noticed is in the same way that we sort of had a lot of hope and belief in the power of social media back in, say, 2011 with the Arab Spring stuff, some of that has been flipped on its head nowadays, and it's being used very differently and has much more insidious, nefarious elements to it that are causing some issues. And I want to talk about how that's affecting our schools today in our shift in perception of social media. So allow me to start with, I'm going to sort of do this in two sides. I'm going to do sort of a problems and solutions. And though I only have so many slides, a couple of them are large, sort of have one big problems one and one big solution one that you may have to pause this video to read. In terms of what is happening in this space, again, I want to share some scenarios with you in our actual session, but just very briefly, as I put in my program description, it doesn't matter if it's Black Lives Matter or the Me Too movement or Build the Wall or Stop the Steal, something like that, kind of those movements as well. These things are being discussed amongst our student bodies, and it's happening online, and it's happening exclusively online. And so where is that happening? While I don't think that educators need to perfectly understand these spaces, I mean, I find it interesting, so I know what's going on and I know what these spaces are, but we don't need to know this to make a big impact. But, that could be Instagram or TikTok comment sections. That could be student activism on a Snapchat with a story that they're posting, or someone subtweeting someone else on Twitter, or someone starting a meme account to mock other students in the building, or screenshots that they take from social media and push through group chats to insult other people. There are a lot of ways that this is happening. But what I'm arguing in this session is it's happening all the time. Social media is what's mediating social disputes. And as a teacher, why that matters is that what happens is this is happening online, and we don't even know what has happened, let alone what was said. By the time we as educators or schools might hear about it, they've already aired it out, they've already chosen sides, and stunningly, there are no follow-ups in real life. They will walk by each other the next day in the building, pass each other on campus or what have you, without mentioning a massive back and forth that may have happened just the evening before on social media. So how effective are we as educators when we have no idea what's happening in terms of socially, emotionally, and how our students are feeling, because we don't know what they're saying, or who or what group or what hashtag or what controversy it has been bubbling right underneath the surface of our students when they arrive for our classes. But then as a school, more broadly, and how are we teaching citizenship and character education if the second our students open their phones or get on their computers, they're doing things that would go against our values and our school cultures? So it seems like we're missing an opportunity, and we're creating problems for ourselves by not addressing this, and therefore not being able to achieve the solutions that we say we want to achieve as schools and as teachers. So now let's get into a little bit more what these look like and why they're such an issue. So this next slide is a doozy. I call it the medium is the message. And so when these disputes and disagreements are happening in social media, these are the things that happen in that space. Y'all use social media. Most of this is gonna resonate. I realize it's a long slide. If you need to pause it, you may. I'll go through them relatively quickly. So social media amplifies the loudest and most extreme voices, because those often are the ones that feel most comfortable to speak, and those are the ones that tend to get amplified by algorithms because they're loud and extreme. Evidence and facts are not required in this space. Likes seem to simulate agreement when that's not always the case. Compromise and common ground are extremely hard to find. Complexity and nuance disappears. Confirmation bias, diametric thinking, and zero-sum thinking is rewarded, which obviously means that also that context is lacking, and that memes and hypotheticals overtake thoughtful and intellectual conversation. You only get 280 characters or 1 minute video or what have you to make a point. Obviously that eliminates context. Obviously that benefits silly hypotheticals or things taken or very simple diametric zero-sum questions. Polarization and tribalism is catalyzed, and that goes very seamlessly into the next one about echo chambers, where small groups become fixed and talk to each other and not others. And then finally, and this one's important, coming to the point I was making previously about when we noticed the first meeting after the meeting that we witnessed at our school, having disagreements online on computers and phones, it makes back channels and group chats way more likely because of what gets moved from into those and what is said in those, which again, the smaller the group, the more loud, the more extreme, the less you need evidence and facts, et cetera, and on down this list. So I realize that this is a lot of information to take in, but I think you'll all agree with me that these are the types of problems that we see when excuse me, when we have disagreements on social media. This is the most important slide, is that all of the above, like all of the problems I mentioned in that last slide, disproportionately affects marginalized groups and silences marginalized voices. Members of the majority, members who have privilege, whether in person and online, of course, benefit from having conversations in spaces where honest engagement, empathy, facts, evidence, etc., can be skirted, and where you don't see someone who might disagree with you face to face, and you do not have to listen to their beliefs, their voices, and their arguments in good faith. And so this space is causing a social justice problem for our schools. And as I said previously, we're not paying attention to it. We're not invested in it. We're not looking into it. We're not dedicating resources to it. We're nowhere to be found in this space. So how can we identify this space with such great problems and not be working to solve it? I think every school in the country has a need to be working in this space, if they truly care about things like social emotional learning and diversity, equity, inclusion. In addition to if they care about their own values and principles and culture, and if they want to teach citizenship and character education. So let's get into solutions. Though this session is mostly a critique, I also believe in providing a few solutions, which I will. More when we're together in person. I'll talk more about the programs that I've built, again, over the last four years working in this problem. But I think there's a few that can portray in this sort of content that I'm portraying to you as in the flipped model of the conference. The first, of course, which is probably the most important, and I think everyone would agree with me, is that we should value face-to-face conversations over everything. It is so incredibly important when our students, when they disagree or when they have issues, have it out with someone that they disagree with, and they can see them, see their facial expressions, see them as they process information, see them as they articulate their beliefs, where they have to honestly, empathetically, on a very human level, have to connect with someone. So obviously that would be the gold standard for having these disagreements that are having online right now. However, it might not be that easy, and I think that is probably the simplest solution. What we get out of that is many-fold. And so again, another large slide for you. Feel free to pause it if you want to look through it. And this is me sort of aggregating my thoughts on why we would need to get a face-to-face conversation and bring them into our classrooms. As I was saying, facial expressions, so important. And in my next one, having adults mentor is way better than having algorithms amplify. Having conversations face-to-face gives us a chance to empower upstanders rather than normalizing bystanders with a click of a like. Elevating face-to-face elevates marginalized voices rather than the loudest voices that get amplified by algorithms. Face-to-face provides listening, articulating, and empathizing rather than extreme voices talking past the other side. It invites questions rather than assumptions. It fosters citizenship through consensus and coalition building, because you're all at the table together making decisions, trying to understand one another, which is way better than projecting a worse version of an opponent or someone you disagree with. It pushes you to compromise or find or understand each other. Maybe that's compromise or common ground, or maybe that's just empathy, rather than a zero-sum, right, wrong, yes, no type of engagement in social media. It pushes for complexity and nuance because you have the time and the space rather than the diametric thinking, the zero-sum, the binary. It values context and evidence because you're all at one table. You have to agree on some evidence. You have to accept each other's context. You can't just talk past each other in messages via social media. It requires, therefore, a common set of facts rather than confirmation bias where you sort of choose your own and then post accordingly. And then finally, it gives time to process and think in a setting where everyone's together, rather than sort of continuously scroll, almost, right, whether you're continuously scrolling about this controversy or this disagreement, or if you're just consuming endlessly on say TikTok or Twitter or what have you, which doesn't allow you the time to process and think. You just continue in your information stream, which doesn't give you that sort of ability to listen and empathize and sit with a tough conversation. So those are some of the reasons we would want to have face-to-face conversations, which again probably sounds easier said than done. And I will talk more when we get together about how I've done that. And let me just finish with this. Ultimately, this is a skill. Helping our students know when and how to take tough conversations offline, it needs to be trained. And as educators, I'm making a case today and will help you all think about ways to build institutions and systems that helps train this skill, but also sets up a space where disagreements and hot button issues can be discussed on a civic level and a character level and a face-to-face conversation level, rather than just discipline, which right now I think is the primary way that schools are handling controversial posts or problems that sort of spill over from social media into our schools. And then finally, and perhaps most importantly, creating these institutions and structures and systems and times, etc., allows you to build a leadership core of students, whether it's in your classroom or on your campus, that understand that there are other ways to educate and to bring a community together, outside of discipline, of course, but also there are adults with whom they can connect to share what's happening in these spaces that are otherwise inaccessible to us. So we need a leadership cohort that will help us get through these issues. And frankly, there's our students more so than us sometimes want social emotional learning and want justice, diversity, equity, inclusion more than we do. And if we can provide the spaces and the training, as I said, building this skill, we can make a major impact on this, and it will show us outsized benefits. So that's my goal for when we get together. If you have any questions, please bring them to this session. I thank you so much for putting in the time to watch this flipped conference presentation, and I look forward to seeing your faces and getting together on the Clouder platform. Thank you so much. See you soon.